Get it, 580 Sports Talk coming to you on a Wednesday. We are with you for the next 2 hours on the sports voice of Kansas, 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online, worldwide at 580WIBW.com, and in living color on our video stream. Catch us on our YouTube channel, 580 Sports Talk, and on Facebook at WIBW News. We're off an hour early today. We'll tap out at 5 and hand things off to the K-State Sports Network from Learfield. K-State's final men's basketball road game of the season in the Queen City, Cincinnati, Ohio. The Wildcats and the Bearcats. And looked like from some social media footage that Coleman Hawkins and Moby Ikegaruke were going through shoot-around this morning. So maybe a chance that the Wildcats could get both of their injured forwards back into the lineup tonight. Tip-off is at 6. Pregame is at 5 right here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9. So we've only got 2 hours of show to get to today. What are we going to talk about? Gee, I don't know. Hand up if you're ready to run it back and try and get back to a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. Hey, Joe Thuney.
Sit your ass down, Joe Thuney.
Put that hand down. Joe Thuney got traded this morning out of absolutely nowhere. Joe Thuney is a Chicago Bear. The Kansas City Chiefs swapping their all-pro and potential future Hall of Famer left guard to Chicago in exchange for a 2026 fourth-round pick. We'll get into the what, the why, the of it all, and the offshoot of what it means for one draft pick from last season who now has a very clearly defined second chance and new role with the Chiefs. And also, how does this reshape the Chiefs offseason? Because we already knew the Chiefs were going to be able to do some salary cap gymnastics to make sure they had room to keep some guys, maybe add some role players, certainly sign their draft picks, all that good stuff. But now they've got $16 million more opened up under the salary cap with the Joe Thuney trade. We'll talk about what that might go to. Also, it was a huge day of NFL news. So we've got a lot of NFL headlines to get to on today's show.
Doing okay?
Am I doing okay? No, I am not okay. Thank you for asking.
Some of the headlines from the NFL today regard or concern Dan's favorite NFL team. And unfortunately, two players that he loves quite a bit are no longer. Well, one is for sure no longer a Seahawk. One may not be. That's always tough. We've all been through it. Like the day that you might know is coming, but it doesn't make it any easier. Well, at least for Tyler Lockett. I think everyone kind of knew that. I don't really get the DK Metcalf thing.
I have bought one Seahawks jersey/jersey in the last decade, and it was Tyler Lockett. So that's where I'm at with my feelings on Tyler Lockett as a player, as a guy to root for. Certainly K-Staters know where I'm coming from. He's always been a guy that Wildcat fans pulled for throughout his NFL career, spent entirely with Seattle until today when he was cut. And no, I am not doing okay. I'm going to need some space to process this loss, to really kind of sit with it for a while. And then if they trade DK Metcalf, I'm just not going to talk to anybody. I'm gonna deactivate my phone and move to Liechtenstein.
Well, lucky you. At the bottom of the 3 o'clock hour, we're going to talk all about this thing that's making you sad.
Yes, we are. Yes, indeed, we are. So we've got some NFL headlines to catch up on today. Lots of stuff going on across the league. We're going to talk K-State with Tim Fitzgerald. Go powercat.com. It's the Wildcat Wrap-Up. We do it at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour every Wednesday. And Fitz will join us to talk about K-State hoops, oncoming K-State spring football practice, and a whole lot more. All kinds of shenanigans with Fitz. He sends a GIF every time that we text. We reach out. We make sure that, we can proceed to schedule with Tim Fitzgerald. And he always responds with a GIF. And every time I think, he can't possibly have found a new, more absurd GIF to reply with. And then today, I get a cartoon cat, as the kids say, throwing that thing in a circle. And, it was a little startling. I don't know if it was it Puss in Boots from
the Shrek franchise?
It may have been Puss in Boots from Shrek. I'm doubling back to check. I actually think that might be the CGI Garfield.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fitz is a very deep bag of gifts.
He really does. He really, really does. Fitz is going to join us bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. We'll do What Is Wrong With You in the 4 o'clock hour. We'll play a little One Gotta Go this hour. Again, we are off an hour early today for K-State basketball. So we look forward to having you join us here for the next couple of hours and to hearing from you across the length of the program today. You can text the show, 785-272-9429. That is 785-272-9429. That is the text line number. Want to hear from Chiefs fans today, how you're feeling about the Joe Thuney trade. We're going to talk it through as we go along today. You can also jump into the chat if you are watching on YouTube. Again, the name of the channel is 580 Sports Talk. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are a daily viewer, or even if you're not. Even if you just like go to YouTube once every blue moon, you should still go subscribe to the show, make the number go up, and make Brendan and I arm wrestle on the show, because that's what we're going to do when we hit 800 subscribers. And if you are watching the show live on YouTube, the live chat feature is open. If you're watching on the web browser, you're watching on your mobile app, you can jump in the live chat, interact with us, interact with your fellow listeners. A hello to Mark and Christopher and everybody else who is watching will weigh in today on the live chat. A little bit of how the sausage gets made here for the sake of the show. I have a rough sketch of how the show is going to look that I send out every night before the show. So we all have it in the morning.
The rundown.
The rundown, yes. A Google Doc. And I don't even really remember what I had at the top of the 3 o'clock hour. Was something Chiefs related. Anyway, I'm feeding my son. And I'm getting ready this morning. I'm feeding him a bottle, getting him ready to go to daycare, take him to daycare. And I check my phone and I see Diana Rossini of The Athletic reports that the Bears are one of many teams engaged with the Chiefs in trade talks for Joe Thuney. I go, what? The Chiefs are considering trading Joe Thuney? That's wild. I never would have seen that coming. So anyway, but that's obviously what we're going to talk about today. I'll go change the rundown when I get to work. Drop off Asher at daycare. I get to work. I change the header of the top of the show to Joe Thuney trade rumors. And then I go check social media, and the trade was done. Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears for a 4th-round pick in 2026. It all happened that fast. And my first reaction breaks down to 2 parts. My first, my reaction was in order, huh? And huh? Because this really did come from nowhere. And it feels like the Chiefs have pivoted hard for their offseason plans based upon the salary cap number they got. I think if they had gotten the salary cap number they expected, Joe Thuney would still be on the Kansas City Chiefs. I think if Travis Kelce had retired, Joe Thuney would still be on the Kansas City Chiefs. But with the opportunity to extend Trey Smith suddenly presented to them by the higher cap number, the Chiefs evaluated where they were at roster-wise and where their offensive line was and says, we cannot pay 2 guards premium money at the same time. And if we have to make a choice, one of our premium guards is 25 and the other is 32 on the last year of his contract. And that was the way the decision-making went. So the Bears got their former chief offensive lineman after all. I'm sure that was a funny call from Brett Veach to Ryan Poles. Hey, remember when the entire internet thought you were going to get Trey Smith? You want our other guy that we have at guard? Any interest in kicking those tires?
And it makes some sense because Ryan Poles was in the Chiefs front office that same year when they went out and added Joe Thuney in free agency.
That's exactly right. So the Chiefs, in exchange for Joe Thuney, who was the team MVP for the Chiefs.
He was an all-pro this year.
An all-pro left guard. Somebody who I think is ticketed for a gold jacket and a bust in Canton. The Chiefs get a 4th-rounder next year. Not even adding to what is a limited collection of draft picks this year. They're going to wait till next year to pick in the 4th round. And they clear $16 million in cap space. And there is a logic to this that you can follow if you are a Chiefs fan, to say that it is not maybe advisable to have 2 guards among your top 5 or 6 highest paid players. Generally speaking, that's not your best allocation of resources. If you have to only have one on a premium deal, yes, it makes more sense, even if one of them is arguably better right now than the other. The older one is better right now than the younger one. You would rather have 5 more years of the younger one than 1 more year of the older one. And with the cap savings, you help to not only ensure that you can keep the younger high ceiling guard and also keep some other cogs from your roster, retain some important pieces, maybe on defense, maybe at wide receiver. There is a through line that you can follow where this makes sense. But the two things that hit me hard about this, number one is how quickly this offseason has turned for the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
That we really thought Trey Smith was going to be wearing a different uniform, and now Trey Smith's going to wear a Chiefs uniform for the next at least 4 years, maybe 5, and Joe Thuney's gone. But the other part of it is this. How do you sell this trade as a step towards improving the offensive line for 2025? How do you sell it? Because you just traded an all-pro, and you're not going to replace him with an all-pro. In fact, it sounds like you're going to replace him from a guy who hasn't played guard maybe in his football life, in Kingsley Suamataia. More about him in a bit. How do you sell a Joe Thuney trade as part of a chain of events that will lead to better offensive line play, which we all agree the Chiefs need year over year from 2024 to 2025? That now becomes the tightrope Brett Veach has to walk the rest of this offseason.
I imagine the way you sell it is, and this is probably an incomplete grade. You can't give it an A through an F. I think you have to give it an incomplete. I think it is, we sell it that we can now use this cap space to go and get a left tackle who's better than we had at left tackle before, which then begs you roster building questions. Is it better to have in A tackle and B guard than it is, to have an A guard and B tackle? Or would you just rather have the best player possible regardless of position? I generally lean with that last category, but we also saw left tackle was so bad this year that maybe Brett Veach does what he has often done in his tenure as the Chiefs general manager, and you just swing in the opposite direction. You see a problem, and you say, okay, that's a weak spot. We're going to invest so many resources into this, it can't help but be a position of strength anymore. Like the offensive line following Super Bowl 55, when he told Patrick Mahomes this will never happen again. They drafted Creed Humphrey, the best center in the draft. They, I guess, technically took a flyer on Trey Smith, who was a top 100 talent without question, but fell because of medical concerns. They took him, and it has certainly panned out. They spent huge money to go and get Joe Thuney in the first place. They went and got Orlando Brown. Like they did all these sorts of moves. I wonder if that is what you do now with this cap saving. $16 million saved against the cap. The Chiefs will have to eat some dead money, but they'll end up saving a whole lot more. Again, about $16 million this year. Do you disperse that amongst a bunch of different things? Do you use that to go get Ronnie Stanley? I think Ronnie Stanley, talent-wise, is awesome. The problem is you only get him for 7 games. And the last time he was healthy, he wasn't quite the same player because he's missed so much time, and he's over 30 now. So, I mean, are you doing that? Are you going to swing another trade? I don't know. That seems to be the en vogue thing to do this year. A, because great players rarely hit free agency anymore. And B, this free agent class kind of stinks. Maybe you go out and you trade for someone else. I don't know who that would be. Most teams don't trade good tackles, except the Ravens trading Orlando Brown to the Chiefs, which still to this day, I think the Ravens are a really well-run franchise. That's one of the dumber trades I can remember.
Well, they got a first-round pick out of it, and Orlando Brown just never got his contract from the Chiefs. That was the whole thing. Brown wanted a big deal. The Ravens weren't willing to give it to him. They trade him with 2 years left on his rookie deal to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs decide after 2 years of him, yeah, we don't want to pay you like an elite left tackle either.
Well, he wanted to play left tackle. He's like, it is my destiny to be a left tackle.
That was the other thing. They wanted to kick Ronnie Stanley over to left tackle.
Right. Well, the other thing, too, if you remember that deal, yes, they got a first-round pick. The Chiefs only ended up moving like 10 spots because they got a second back.
Yeah.
So one of the more bizarre trades. That does not happen. I don't know of any guys who believe that God has determined they will be like, offensive lineman Calvinism is not something I have come across anywhere else in football. So I'm not sure that that's going to be an option for the Chiefs this offseason. But that would be my guess, is that's the sell, that we think okay guard play with a great tackle is more valuable than okay tackle play with a great guard. And we're going to stay younger by keeping Trey Smith. We'll only have one guy we pay the big bucks to at guard, and we'll find a better tackle out there. And if that's the plan, fine, because at least you have a plan. It is clearly laid out for us. I think the best fit at tackle re-signed with the Rams. Personally, I still think Alaric Jackson made the most sense. He never really hit the market, so I'm not going to get too upset about it. But I just don't know how many good fits there are out there for that spot, which is my concern. Like, if all this is to like make sure you can keep Nick Bolton and to find money to keep Justin Reid on a 1-and-1 deal or something. And I like Justin Reid. You've heard me say that. Nate Taylor of The Athletic and the KC Sports Network said on his podcast yesterday that the Chiefs are leaning toward not bringing Justin Reid back. And Justin Reid responded on Twitter and said, well, that's news to me. Like, if that's all this savings goes to, I'd be pretty disappointed. I would have some worries. But I'm willing to say, and I think it was Paul on YouTube brought this up, I'm willing to say Brett Veach deserves the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to let the start of free agency play out before I grade this too intensely. That being said, the other part you brought up, all you got was a future fourth?
Yeah, future fourth is wild to me. And I understand the Bears because of where they finished and picking pretty high in all 7 rounds, being a little stingy with their draft picks this year and thinking that, next year a fourth is going to be from us not as valuable as a fourth this year. At the same time, like, if I were the Chiefs and I've only got 6 picks going into 2025, I think I'm insisting on a 2025 pick.
If I'm the Chiefs, like, oh, well, he's a little bit older. His 2 oldest seasons have been his 2 best. Back-to-back first-team All-Pros after 30. No, you're paying me for this year. That is my one hang-up where I think just on face value, that was, I don't want to do the whole, they fleeced them thing, because that's so 4th grade analysis. But I do think the Chiefs did not get maximum value back that they could have gotten for Thuney.
Yeah, that was really surprising, and it's reminiscent of what they got back for L'Jarius Sneed, right? They didn't take a 2023 pick or 2024 pick for L'Jarius Sneed. They took a 3rd rounder in 2025, and that actually paid off because the Titans ended up being worse.
Yes.
And they got a higher pick in the 3rd round than they would have if they'd taken the 2024 pick.
But I think there's a good chance the Bears are better. Now, like, way better? I don't know. But closer to pick 16 versus pick 10, 1 through 32. Yeah, I think that's, they have a much better head coach, an offensive-minded head coach. They already have a better offensive line. Like, yeah, I think they probably will be better. So I that's a miss for me. And again, Brett Veach has done much more good than bad. But I think you could have gotten something better now. Like, even if it was still a 4th round pick, like, okay, fine. That's another, bite at the apple. L'Jarius Sneed was a 4th round pick.
Yeah. Couple of other points to make here. Tyler in the YouTube comment says Chiefs had to get younger. And I think that there is a lot to that idea. The one thing there was a lot to take away from how poorly Super Bowl 59 went for the Chiefs. But one of the things that you watch the Eagles and you watch the Chiefs and how they looked in that game is that the Chiefs did look older and they looked slower.
Yes.
And I think you saw that more vividly when it came to the comparisons of the skill players. But as a whole, yes, the Chiefs probably do need to start transitioning from the core that won back-to-back Super Bowls in 3 and 5 years to whatever the next core is going to look like as Mahomes rounds the corner into his 30s.
Yep.
And Joe Thuney was not going to be part of that. This is an example of something that we discussed when we were talking about Travis Kelce. Somebody had brought up the idea of, it was Aaron Schatz of ESPN said the Chiefs should cut Travis Kelce. The Chiefs should move on from Travis Kelce. And that's an unfathomable thing to think about doing. But the New England Patriots were great for 20 years because A, they had the quarterback, and B, they had the head coach. But C, they were always willing to make the move on a player a year early instead of a year late. And for the Chiefs, in this case, this was the only year because Joe Thuney would have hit free agency next year. If the Chiefs had decided not to bring him back, they would have been entirely within their rights to do that. But now, at least, they get the value of the cap space for this important offseason, and they do get a future fourth-round pick.
Yeah.
And that's better than nothing.
Yep. No, you're definitely right about that. No disagreement from me, because the argument for the reverse is, well, if he gets a big contract next year in free agency, you get a comp pick for him. Sure. But then if you go and sign a big free agent, that cancels each other out and you don't get the comp pick anymore. So I wouldn't want to. I think teams sometimes get a little too worked up about the compensatory picks, to be honest with you. They're more valuable now that you can trade them. You used to not be able to. Now that you can trade those, they're more valuable. But I'd rather get the return now. I just think Joe Thuney is a good enough player, and the Bears have a big enough need. You could have gotten a little bit more out of them. I don't know. Maybe that's the friendship tax. Maybe, all right, Ryan Poles, sure.
The last point I'll make for now on this is we have talked about the increasing difficulty that the Chiefs will face in putting together a contender as things go on, going from easy mode to the second level, and now kind of entering the third level as your Hall of Famers that you've had for so long, Kelsey and Chris Jones and Joe Thuney, as those guys start to age out of being core players and their careers end, or they stop being as effective as they've been, or now in Joe Thuney's case aren't on the team anymore. This is just part of going to that next level and having to make a hard decision like this. The Chiefs are not better today than they were yesterday. They're not. You're not a better team trading away an all-pro talent. Doesn't matter what position you're talking about here. But it does have to be part of a bigger picture for where the Chiefs go from here, building what their offensive line is going to look like in the future. We know Reid Humphrey and Trey Smith are going to be part of it. They're young and they're really good. As for the other three spots long-term, I still think Jawan Taylor's going to be a cap casualty after next season. But the left side, now a big question mark, is one of those answers currently on the roster. We're going to talk about Kingsley Suamataia and his second chance. We've also got some NFL headlines to get to, how the Chiefs' entire offseason approach changed today based on not just what they did, but what happened elsewhere in the league today. We got What Is Wrong With You coming. We got Tim Fitzgerald coming. We are off early at 5 o'clock today. So thank you for being with us. We got a long way to go, short time to get there here on 580 Sports Talk. 3:32, just getting underway on this Wednesday edition of 580 Sports Talk. Dan Lucero, Brendan Dworzinski kicking it with you this afternoon. In the immediate aftermath of the Joe Thuney trade, sources from not just the Chiefs beat, but also from the broader NFL media landscape, suggested that Kingsley Suamataia is going to be first in line to get a crack and be the left guard for the Kansas City Chiefs moving forward. Now, we had just talked, I think it was yesterday, but it was certainly recently, about the idea that Suamataia would be Joe Thuney's protege at the spot. That, of course, he started Week 18 against the Broncos at left guard and performed well enough that, rather notably, according to Nate Taylor of The Athletic, Suamataia was getting ready to come into Super Bowl 59 and replace Mike Caliendo at left guard. Clearly, the Chiefs think there's something there. It's a brand new position for Kingsley. He played right tackle his first year at BYU, and then he flipped over to left tackle for his draft year. So he's never played inside. But I went back and I was looking at his pre-draft scouting reports from a bunch of different sources, and the way that Suamataia is described in a lot of them kind of sounds like a guard. Here's what NFL.com said about Kingsley before he was drafted. He has good size and adequate play strength, but sloppy hand placement limits control and consistency as both a run and pass blocker. Suamataia could struggle to handle NFL edge speed and pass protection. Boy, did he. But he's quick enough for move blocking duties in outside zone and in space. That sounds like what the Chiefs asked their guards to do quite a bit. Pro Football Focus wrote this, and they were higher as a whole on Suamataia at the time. Suamataia is an impressive athlete with difference-making explosiveness and power in the run game. Whether blocking in man gap or zone concepts, he has an upper and lower body strength to drive and displace. Pro Football Focus also went on to say, I worry about him being baptized by fire if he is drafted in the first round and called upon to start right away. Yeah, that happened.
Prescient.
That's why we read these things, because sometimes they're right on the money. From Pro Football Network in their pre-draft assessment of Suamataia. At 6'6" and 325 pounds, Suamataia looms over the competition, and his combination of elite explosiveness, mass, and high-end length grants him quantifiably elite power capacity. Quantifiably elite power capacity sounds like something that would be like on the side of a blender I would purchase. Like the magic bullet or something along those lines. He can use that power to drive open lanes in the run game and shock rushers with violent punches in pass protection. So, plays with violence, plays with power, a lot of size, might struggle with speed because of his footwork. To me, that sounds like a guy whose traits maybe fit a little better at guard over the long haul. Now, like we talked about when we were last talking about Kingsley Suamataia, the traits were so good, even if the overall product was a little raw and you didn't quite know what you were going to get. It wasn't as polished as some of the other guys coming into the draft last year, that it was worth a flyer from a team like Kansas City. You don't have the access to pick the guys who are sure thing starters. So you got to take some chances on the guys for whom, if everything pops right, they can be stars. It's like, Passanio. Tano Passanio is a great example of this.
Tano.
You take a guy with like second round traits, but like fifth or sixth round experience, and you take that guy in the third round, and you hope it pops. And it never really did for Tano Passanio, but you get the idea, right? Those are the kinds of things you have to be willing to do if you're always drafting at the back of the draft, what the Chiefs have done for close to a decade now and are probably going to do for the decade to come. But if Suamataia's athletic strengths are still his strengths, that seems to me like somebody who could pick up guard pretty quickly. And like you said, I think it was yesterday, it's really hard to take a guy in the top 2 rounds and just have him not do anything for 2 years. Like, you got to get him in. You got to get something out of that player and out of that pick.
Because it's, first round, if you don't play right away, generally speaking, that's a whiff because those are supposed to be your blue chip guys, your cornerstone kinds of players. Top two, day two, those are like your regular starters. And then day three is generally occasionally a diamond in a rough, small school, underscouted guy, and like special teamers. That's a lot of what you get on day three. Obviously, there's room for that to be malleable. But if you take a guy in the second round, you're expecting that he is going to be a starter, or at the very least, they are going to be a contributing player. And if you got like 4 games of full-time play from Kingsley Suamataia in 1 year, and the first 2 were bad, and he got benched after that, came in for an injury, and then came in an exhibition game effectively. Yeah, that's not a great year one. And if you're saying you're going to be an apprentice in year 2, that's not a good pick at that point. Like that's a miss. You still got 2 more years to turn it around. But that's a guy who didn't play a lot in college, who played in 2 different systems in college because he was a transfer, and then he doesn't play at all for 2 years. I mean, you're suddenly running into Trey Lance territory. Like if you're not on the no one will ever be quite to that degree, but if you're not on the field, you're never going to get to play speed and play experience. And that, to me, is what Suamataia needs right now. Now, granted, I also think if you move him to guard and you get an established left tackle, a really great way to help a young, inexperienced guy get that experience is to play with a good starter to his left and an elite starter to his right.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Yeah, covers for a lot of sins. And it makes it more imperative now that that's the direction that the Chiefs go in at left tackle. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But first, after this timeout, whole lot went down in the National Football League today. And we'll talk about the big headlines next on this shortened edition of 580 Sports Talk. Lot going on in the NFL today. And since we are an hour short today due to K-State hoops, we don't have a traditional 580 Sports Talk headlines segment. I thought we'd just check all the boxes and NFL headlines real quick. Big one out of the AFC West today, aside from Joe Thuney being traded from the Chiefs to the Bears. Max Crosby is now the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. Raiders giving Crosby a 3-year, $106.5 million extension with $91.5 million guaranteed. We were really close to a Crosby trade last year, it felt like. And it even felt like this offseason he might be a guy that teams would at least call the new Raiders GM, John Spytek, about and see if they couldn't pry him out of Vegas. But I wonder if this is the start of, dare I say it, a recommitment to excellence with the Raiders organization. They've got a coach, like best coach they've hired in 20 years.
You ain't rebuilding with Pete Carroll.
No, absolutely. That is just it. You did not bring a 70-something, what would that be? What did we decide that was? Sexagenarian or septuagenarian? Septuagenarian.
Yeah.
You don't hire one of those and decide, yeah, we're gonna take our time. We're gonna build through the next 3 years. No, it's pedal to the metal. We're gonna try to win. And obviously, you can't do that if you don't keep your best guy. So the Raiders keep their best guy, and it's a fascinating pivot. I think what it shows you is a commitment to winning and getting better right away. And we'll see how feasible that is without a good quarterback solution. But paying Crosby is a good step for the Raiders.
Yeah, this is smart. And I do not think the Raiders will be real bold take here. I don't think they're going to be a laughingstock this year. I
don't either.
I think Carroll himself raises the floor way too high for that to be the case. And honestly, the more I've thought about it, I really like Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. I think Chip is going to really extend his life in football by saying, I don't really want to be in charge anymore. It's like, I want a game plan. In college, I don't want to recruit. He didn't. I don't think he recruited a single guy at Ohio State last year.
I think you're right.
Ryan Day was like, nah, that's fine. You're my boy. You can just hang, call plays. That's fine. And like all he wants to do is call offense. And I think the reason the Raiders are going to lose a lot of games this coming year is just because they don't have enough talent. I don't think it's going to be because they're clowns, which for most of my life, not adult life, most of my life has not been the case. They've been a complete circus.
But yes, you hire Pete Carroll. Well, the Seahawks were.
You hire him to win and be. You hire him to be serious.
Circus in some ways, but not on Sundays. They weren't a circus on Sundays. They were a circus off the field in some ways, but never on Sunday.
To that degree, he's a little like Belichick. And I know that's crazy. Like, what? Because they're both old? Like, is Pete Carroll also dating someone who's not even 25 yet? Like, what do you mean?
No, still happily married. Pete
yes, for many, like 50 years at this point. What I mean is former Belichick players have always said, like, look, Bill's rules for us were be on time, do your job on the field, and don't talk to the media. Like, those are, like, we could show up to meetings in pajamas. He didn't care as long as we were on the field on time and in the meeting room on time. Yeah. Like, he let us be ourselves, just don't talk about it to the media. Like, we felt like we had a lot of that freedom. I think Pete Carroll's a lot of the same way. He just allows guys to talk into the microphone during, Wednesday press. Like, those dudes on the Seahawks, a lot of personalities there, and we learned all about them.
And they loved him. Like,
yes.
When he got let go in Seattle, they had a dinner for him in Seattle, and there were the pictures of it on the internet. They got Russell Wilson in the same room with Richard Sherman again. Like,
yeah,
like that tells you all you need to know right there about what those guys think of Pete Carroll. So
while we're talking Seahawks, you want to get to the other big news today?
Yeah, let's do that. The Seahawks cut longtime wide receiver Tyler Lockett, going to save them about $17 million to the cap. Also, DK Metcalf apparently saw that news and said, oh, so we're getting rid of wide receivers around here now, huh? I would like to be traded. And apparently the Seahawks were a little caught off guard by that request. It was made through the media first, but the Seahawks have said that they will accede to his demands and try to make a deal work. The first team I saw credibly tied to that on social media, by the way, Buffalo.
Buffalo is
It's a big cap.
one.
It's going to be a $30-something million cap hit unless you restructure.
So he'll get an extension. That's what this is going to be. It's going to be one of those trade and immediately.
Yeah.
Like how we talk about tag and trade, like you're trading for the tag number, but you're going to extend him, so it doesn't really matter. That's what this is effectively going to be, because I don't believe there's anything guaranteed on the deal, or almost nothing. But DK's 27 years old, and he's the number one wide receiver. Like, he's going to get paid a lot, and he's probably going to get a 4 or 5 year deal from whoever.
I feel like he's better than people realize he is, and some of that is that the Seahawks have been out of the national spotlight for the better part of his career. But DK Metcalf is huge and a pretty good route runner. He's physical. And sometimes he loses his mind a little bit, and the right team's got to rein that in a little bit. But he's an easy 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. You get him in the right offense.
900+ yards every year of his career. This year he finished with 992, just under 1,000 yards. Yeah, he's a good player. There were reports last week, or was it earlier this week, that it was last week, that Green Bay is sniffing around on Metcalf. I would do it. And I'm in the minority among Green Bay fans. You want the 23rd pick?
Yeah.
First round?
Yeah, I'd take it.
I'd give it to you right now.
We're going to need a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Because
Clearly.
They're going to pay Geno Smith. He's going to be throwing to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I don't know. What's Steve Largent doing these days?
I don't know, but Jackson Smith and Jigba's freaking out online, too.
Yeah, he's like, hey, what the hell?
Yeah.
What I have seen
Dude, chill out, man. You're going to be wide receiver 1.
You're going to get so many targets.
You're going to catch 100 balls next year.
What I have seen in the Packers sphere is right now the negotiation sits at second-round pick and Romeo Doubs, who I love. I think Romeo Doubs is a really good player. He ain't DK Metcalf, but I think he's a really nice player. As for Lockett, was conversing with a buddy of mine today who's like, yeah, I hate the way he plays. Like, I know he stays healthy because he never gets tackled, but like, fight for an extra yard once or twice. I said, nah, man, I would much rather have a guy I know is going to play 16 or 17 games every year and sacrifice like 9 yards a season. I think it's smart. I think more players should do it, frankly. He is going to make a team better. And I think Christian Kirk also got released today. I don't know if you had mentioned that. Sorry,
I was going to mention that too.
So Christian Kirk signed that huge contract in Jacksonville a couple years ago. He was released today.
They're only saving $10.37 million and eating $13.65.
Yeah, and Lawrence liked him. I was a little surprised by that move.
I think, side note here, I think he's going to Washington. Cliff, him and him have a great relationship. He knows
from
the
Arizona.
offense.
Yeah.
And Cliff is on a record saying he likes him.
I got like 20 wide receivers, man. You can't have all the wide receivers.
Well, no, everyone's a free agent besides Terry.
Yeah, that's true.
Now you're Debo, so he's a perfect 2.
I think for the Chiefs' purposes, Tyler Lockett, their own guy, Hollywood Brown, Christian Kirk, I think any of the 3 of them you could make a very good argument for. Now, for Lockett and Kirk, you've got to make the money work. Brown is by far the most affordable, but I mean, he was 1 for 6 this past year, then missed the whole damn season. You can get him for probably nothing. If you could find a way to make the contract work, I would be fascinated by going out and getting Tyler Lockett this year. He doesn't have the speed he had earlier in his career. I mean, he's been in the league for, 11 seasons, 10 seasons?
10 seasons.
Like, obviously, he doesn't have that kind of speed. But especially with Rashee Rice coming back from a pretty nasty torn ACL and more injury, I really like the idea of bringing in a steady veteran. I don't need peak Tyler Lockett. I need a guy who can go out there, get me 700 yards. He's going to catch the ball every time it comes near him, and you just know what you're going to get. I think that stable presence in the Chiefs wide receiver room would honestly do a lot of good, especially at the start of the year, because realistically, coming off that injury, Rice is not going to be the 100% Rashee Rice probably until November or later. So I would, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm at least kicking the tires. I'm at least calling the agent and saying, hey, what would it take?
The question you have to ask with Lockett is how much of his drop in production last year was just JSN elevating himself above Lockett on the depth chart, and how much of that is he ain't got it no more. And I think it's close, more the former than the latter, to be honest.
Yes.
I think there's another year in Tyler Lockett because, as you said, he hasn't played the most physical of styles. Like, he's not a guy who like is physically breaking down. To me. Played in all 17 games last year. I would love to see him in Kansas City. I know a lot of Wildcat fans would too. There are a couple other headlines. We're going to get to them in the 4 o'clock hour. We'll take a timeout, play One Gotta Go to wrap up the 3 o'clock hour right after this on 580 Sports Talk.
so far. I'm almost there.
Yes, I know. I get all the updates.
Made it. Safe and sound.
I know.
Well, did you know I was with USPS the whole time?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Keep your business in the know with USPS Ground Advantage Service. Visit USPS.com/in-the-know.
WIBW, Topeka.
I'm so sick of these people. You know.
You all are interested. Goodbye.
You're ugly. You're disgusting. I'm going to kill you. Give me $200.
Well, gotta go.
It's one gotta go time on 580 Sports Talk. The lineup of Big 12 Eats has been announced for the Big 12 women's and men's basketball tournament at the T-Mobile Center.
Oh,
Let's go.
Women's tournament started this week. We will go with the teams for whom we have some ties. So both Kansas teams, West Virginia for Spencer and Colorado for me. These are the 4 menu items. You got to get rid of one of them, but you can have the other 3. KU this year, for the second year in a row, it's Big J's loaded mac and cheese.
Yeah.
For K-State, the Power Cat steak tacos.
Oh.
For West Virginia, once again, it's the Mountaineer pepperoni roll. And for Colorado, it's the chili burrito bowl. One got to go.
I'm getting rid of the pepperoni roll because it's bad. I had it
Yeah,
last
you had
year.
it.
It's not authentic. It's too bready. It's not what it's supposed
What
to
if
be.
they tighten it up? What if you got like a good one?
Then maybe I'd keep it. But far-fetched.
Okay, I've got to go. I'm going to eliminate the chili burrito bowl. It might be good. I'm not saying it's not. That is a real risk to eat at a sporting event. When you're going to be around people all day.
File concession stand chili next to sports bar oysters and gas station sushi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just too risky for me.
I do want to know what makes the steak tacos Power Cat steak tacos. I hope I get to find out next week in Kansas City. Coming up at the 4 o'clock and final hour of today's show, Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowerCat.com. What is wrong with you? And more Chiefs free agency talk.
inclusion and access to health care, employment, and education for people with disabilities, families, and communities. That's my Easter Seals. Make it yours. Learn more and get involved at EasterSeals.com.
Stay connected for news, sports, weather, and ag on the Voice of Kansas, FM 104.9, 580 AM, WIBW, Topeka.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance. I'm Cammie McCormick. The latest federal agency to consider steep cuts to its workforce, the Department of Veterans Affairs. Michael Wallace reports 80,000 jobs could be eliminated.
In an internal memo, the VA's chief of staff says the department needs to return to its 2019 or pre-Biden administration staffing levels. More than a quarter of the VA's workforce are veterans, like Jeffrey Stewart, who works at the West Haven VA Hospital in Connecticut.
I'm nervous to see if I'm still going to have a job come March 14th.
The deadline for Congress to avoid a government shutdown. Veteran Bridget Prince is a patient at that VA.
If you start eliminating the workers, that means our care diminishes.
promise some CBS News.
President Trump has given automakers a brief reprieve, a 30-day exemption from the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt was asked today if that's enough time for them to prepare for what's ahead.
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
A man accused of being part of the attack on American forces during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan appeared in a U.S. courtroom today. Correspondent Scott McFarland was there.
Wearing a blue jail jumpsuit and standing next to an interpreter here at the federal court in Alexandria, Virginia, Mohammed Sharifullah said very little as the prosecutor and the judge explained the charges he faces, including conspiracy to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization. That would be life in prison if he's convicted. He'll be held in Marshall's custody pending a hearing on Monday.
13 American service members were killed in the attack on Abbey Gate at the Kabul airport. The White House said today the U.S. has been talking directly to Hamas, something that has not occurred in the past because it's considered a terrorist group. It comes as Israel pushes Hamas to accept an alternative arrangement for the ceasefire in Gaza and release more hostages. In the meantime, it's withholding aid, as Deborah Potter reports.
Human rights groups have called this a starvation policy, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has raised the pressure even more, saying he will not rule out cutting off all electricity to Gaza if Hamas doesn't budge.
Millions of Americans are dealing with severe weather today. Meteorologist Grant Gilmore.
This is a massive storm system. You've got snow to the north, you've got severe weather all across the mid-Atlantic down into the south, and then you've got trailing showers and storms all the way into the Gulf. This is just a massive storm system with wide-reaching impacts that will be felt over the next couple of days. In fact, they have been felt for the last couple of days.
This is CBS News.
Brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You can save big when you bundle your auto, home, motorcycle, RV, or boat. Visit Progressive.com.
Kansas Information Network News. I'm Lisa Buckman. Over 900 Evergy customers are back online after high winds led to widespread outages across most of Emporia Tuesday night. Here's Julio Flores with more.
The outage was first reported just before 6 p.m. and stretched from Commercial Street to the western end of Emporia. According to Evergy management, high winds caused a pair of conductors to slap together, causing the outage. Power was restored before 7 p.m. I'm Julio Flores.
The Wichita City Council is rejecting plans to set a public hearing for a community improvement district in Old Town. Businesses in the neighborhood had called for a 2% sales tax to help offset paid parking. Property owners in Old Town had submitted a plan for a community improvement district. This is Kansas Information Network News.
Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 431-0000. I'm attorney Tyler Patterson. Patterson Legal Group has recovered a lot of money for a lot of injured people. We do this by getting every dollar that every one of our injured clients deserve for their doctor bills, car repairs, lost wages, and even money that the insurance companies don't want you to know about. Our attorneys can get you the results that you deserve. In a wreck, need a check? Call Patterson Legal Group today. Patterson Legal is the way to go. Call 431-0000.
Do you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans? With credit card debt at all-time highs, Debt Relief Advocates is urgently notifying consumers of debt relief now being made available, designed to aid consumers with out-of-control credit card debt. Those who qualify and enroll for this relief program will only have to pay back a fraction of what they owe. This is not bankruptcy or a debt consolidation loan. This is a relief program that credit card companies would rather you not know about, as it ends your debt nightmare and saves you lots of money. Consumers owing at least $10,000 in credit card debt or personal loans can now take advantage of this debt relief as the cost of living skyrockets. Debt Relief Advocates has established a relief hotline for you to call to learn what debt reduction you may qualify for, so don't wait. For this free information, call the Relief Hotline at 800-303-1219. 800-303-1219. 800-303-1219.
Here's your updated forecast on 580 WIBW. Bright sunshine expected this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 42. Northwest winds 10 to 20 miles an hour. Clear skies again tonight. Lows level off around 25. Cloudy skies tomorrow, high at 51. Upper 40s Friday, warmer on Saturday with highs in the mid-50s. I'm meteorologist Ray Miller in the Capital Federal Weather Center. Currently 41.
FM 104.9, 580 AM WIBW.
Let's get it. Hour number 2 and the final hour of a short edition of 580 Sports Talk on this hump day. So glad you're with us on the Sports Voice of Kansas, 580 WIBW, FM 104.9, online at 580WIBW.com, and in living color on our YouTube stream. Catch us on YouTube. 580 Sports Talk is the name of the channel. Subscribe if you have not. If you're watching, I'll try to get my hat brim out of my eyes a little bit. You can actually see me somewhat. You can also watch us on Facebook, WIBW News. My name is Dan Lucero. Brendan Rosinski and Spencer Dupuy are with me as well. And we are off at 5 today for K-State basketball. Final road game of the Big 12 season for the Cats as they take on different kind of cats. Bearcats of Cincinnati. K-State looking for a season series sweep of Cincinnati and are hopeful to have Coleman Hawkins and Moby Ike-Garuke in the lineup again tonight. Hawkins being called a game-time decision for Jerome Tang's Wildcats. Would sure go a long way toward trying to get a second straight win and gain some momentum ahead of next week's Big 12 tournament. Tip-off at 6 o'clock from Fifth Third Arena in Cincinnati tonight. Pregame at 5 on the K-State Sports Network here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9.
We know John, watching along on YouTube today, says he's hoping for the Cats to win tonight. I have a lot of respect for any fan who, even in a year that's lost and the game, quote-unquote, doesn't matter, who still pulls for their team. So respect to John, respect to the Cats fans who are still living and dying with every game. I do have a lot of respect for you guys.
Yeah, been a frustrating year, but I think these guys, I think K-State has proven as the year's gone on that their guys are still playing hard. Jerome Tang's still coaching them hard. They haven't put a roll of stamps on the season yet. They just don't have the guys, and they lost their momentum with that 2-game trip through Utah, and then Coleman Hawkins got hurt.
Now, important question, because you mentioned it earlier on. When you hear the phrase the Queen City, do you first think of Cincinnati, Ohio, or Charlotte, North Carolina?
Charlotte.
I think of Pueblo, Colorado. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Nah, I'm kidding. It's never been called that ever. Yeah, I usually think
Queen of something.
I usually think of Cincinnati first.
I think of Charlotte.
I used
but
to
that
always...
must be my East Coast.
Yeah, nearby. Yeah, sort of ish nearby. Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
I used to always think of Charlotte because I've been to Charlotte many times. But because of a video by comedian Will Sennett in which he refers to his hometown as the Queen City of Cincinnati, Ohio, I now always think of it as Cincinnati.
So when you go to Wikipedia,
his ode to Princess Diana,
and you look up Queen City may refer to, and it's a bunch of different places who claim.
Yeah, I saw this list earlier. Most of these are nonsense.
Yes. So you have 3 cities that are actually called Queen City. There's a Queen City, Iowa, which is actually no longer inhabited. There's Queen City, Missouri.
Formerly inhabited place.
Yeah. Formerly inhabited place, like my apartment in North Platte, Nebraska, formerly inhabited. Queen City, Missouri, Queen City, Texas. There are also, I have never in my life, and I am from there, heard Denver, Colorado referred to as the Queen City of the Plains. Never, ever, ever.
Of the Plains? I don't think of Denver as really, I guess technically.
Well, we're a little shy of the mountains.
I guess.
There are people who, you see the pictures and you think, oh, Denver must be in the mountains. No, man, you got another 30, 45 minutes before you get up into the mountains. Definitely in the foothills. But yeah, it is, the plains start like at Lyman for me.
Okay. Fair. Yeah.
That's a city boy talking. Helena, Montana is called the Queen City of the Rockies, why isn't that what Denver is called?
I have applied.
That's a great question.
Strangely, I have applied to jobs in multiple alleged Queen cities. Shout out to Marquette, Michigan, and Crookston, Minnesota. Never in my research of those cities did I ever learn that about them.
So do Traverse City and Marquette, who are both listed here as the Queen City of the North, do they have a rivalry over that?
I would imagine.
One would presume.
Also,
yes.
Sedalia, Missouri is the Queen City of the Prairies, but not
false.
The Queen City of the Plains.
And Springfield is the Queen City of the Ozarks? No. Incorrect.
Yeah.
Also, Cumberland, Maryland, or the Queen City of the Alleghenies. No, I drive through that all the time. I would drive through there all the time. No.
See, the battle between Cincinnati and Charlotte, the difference is Charlotte was literally named for the Queen of Great Britain. Queen Charlotte was a real person in the 1700s.
Yes. So that is where that comes from. Cincinnati, I do not know how it got the moniker the Queen City of the West, which is kind of funny.
A poem in the 1800s.
Oh.
I think it was it Wadsworth? Longfellow? Someone. Yeah, they wrote a poem and called it the
Henry
Queen
Wadsworth
City.
Longfellow. Good call. Look at you.
Great pool.
Yeah.
What can I say? I put a note about
Catawba wine of an 1854 poem.
Yeah.
For many years, Cincinnati was also known as Porkopolis. That's a much better nickname. I'm never calling it the Queen City again.
People are like, oh, why do you read Wikipedia so much? Because I find all the information I could ever need. I had a note about Carl Sandburg in my game notes for a Washburn game last week. Like, I love this stuff. Wikipedia is the best resource we have as humans.
I've never heard of Virginia Beach, Virginia referred to as the Queen City.
What about the Queen City of the Shenandoah Valley, Staunton, Virginia?
No, that's not.
Fake as
No. Yeah.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
And also, every major city in Canada is the Queen City, apparently.
I was going to say
Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, even Regina, Saskatchewan, the town that rhymes with fun.
Home of the Rough Riders.
Yeah, that is
Ada,
correct.
Oklahoma, Queen City of the Chickasaw Nation. Come on.
No?
I don't think so.
I would have to take the Chickasha people's name for it, I think, at that point.
Real question is, how can there be multiple cities or towns in one state? Like we said, who's the Queen City of the North between
two places in Michigan?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then there's also 3 places in Pennsylvania that are just nicknamed the Queen City.
I think we need to be a little more creative with our nicknames.
Yes.
here, folks. I took us so far off topic. I hand up. I apologize.
That's all right. Anyway, K-State in Porkopolis tonight against the Cincinnati Bearcats. Pre-game at 5.
The Porkopolis
Tip-off
Bearcats
at
is actually
6.
a sick name.
Mark H. points out there is no Queen City of Kansas. This is true. We looked at the Wikipedia. If any city in Kansas would like to make a claim to be the Queen City of the Sunflower State, this feels like
I'm going to make a nomination. I'm going to get in the lab here.
Okay, it feels like it's on a tee for Salina.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it.
Like,
yep.
Paul says Topeka is the Queen City of the 580 Sports Talk Show. That's a fact.
That's true.
Mark H. asks if I have been to Pikes Peak in the Royal Gorge. I have. I've been to both. I have been down the Royal Gorge, and I've been up Pikes Peak. So,
nice.
Yeah, got that going for me. Anyhow, let us get to some more Chiefs talk because the Chiefs made big news today. They traded their all-pro left guard Joe Thuney to the Chicago Bears for a 2026 fourth-round draft pick. And it feels like the salary cap number has completely shifted how the Chiefs are going to operate this offseason. For one, they're going to have more salary cap room than they expected. And for two, I think it has changed their offensive line strategy from, gosh, we're just not going to be able to afford Trey Smith. We're going to have to let him walk to, well, let's do a deal with Trey Smith. We can get something done, a market setting and exceeding contract for our 25-year-old elite guard while getting something of value for our 32-year-old elite guard who is on the final year of his contract. The Bears, by the way, expected to give him an extension. So they're not just paying for 1 year, but that's also part of why the return was what it was. There's only 1 year left on his contract. So how else has the Chiefs offseason changed? Now that they do have more salary cap room, but a good chunk of that is going to go to Trey Smith. But they just freed up $16 million today by trading Joe Thuney, and they're going to be able to free up. It's a pretty big number. I don't remember the exact number, but like today, the Cowboys restructured Dak Prescott's deal, and that freed up $36.5 million under the cap for the Cowboys. The Chiefs are going to be able to do something similar with Patrick Mahomes' deal this offseason. So they're looking at a little more cap space, probably a lot more than they expected going into this offseason. So let's start here. Is it more likely in your mind now that Nick Bolton and or Justin Reid and or a guy like Hollywood Brown are Kansas City Chiefs next year? You kind of already spoke, Brendan, to the thought of if they feel like Hollywood Brown's out of their price range or another team wants to swoop in and give him a multi-year deal, maybe the Chiefs would then look at a couple of players who hit the open market today in Christian Kirk, the former Jag, and Tyler Lockett, the former Seahawk. So I do think, though, that they were always going to have to do something for a veteran wide receiver. I don't think necessarily that has changed. I don't think anything that has happened since the salary cap number got released has changed the Chiefs' need for that.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it maybe makes it more possible that both Bolton and Reid can return to the Chiefs. I would like to see them both back. I really would. And I think they would prioritize Bolton over Reid because you don't have an in-house replacement for Nick Bolton the way that you could look at the secondary and say, well, we'll just play Brian Cook where Justin Reid's been playing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's value in bringing them both back, and I think it's a little bit more possible, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's certainly more possible. I, in fact, just saw this from Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride moments ago. Let me pull this up. He tweeted it earlier today, but from moments ago, he says this, and Pete is as tied in as anybody with the Chiefs. Trading left guard Joe Thuney frees up $16 million, space that can help sign the tagged right guard Trey Smith to a long-term extension. As for left guard, the Chiefs really liked what they saw from Kingsley Suamataia in Week 18 and have other options in-house there. So that money probably go, if we're talking about like $16 million for this year, for 2025, what is that being used for? Part of the cap hit up front for Trey Smith would make a lot of sense. The Chiefs are one of the teams that generally likes to load up early so they don't have a whole lot late, so they can make cuts like they have for a number of players over time, and that they're not attached to guys as they get older. I think it's more likely that this money goes directly toward Smith and Reid than it is to go to anyone else. Because when we're talking Nick Bolton, if you're bringing him back, you're looking at, 3 or 4 years, probably?
Yeah.
A longer-term contract.
So let's talk about that in the context of another NFL headline today.
Okay.
The Zach Bond contract.
Yeah.
The Eagles have re-upped with their all-pro linebacker, Zach Bond, who was like a fringe NFL guy coming into this season, given a new role in the Eagles defense, thrived in it to the point where he was a nominee for Defensive Player of the Year and was an all-pro, and deservedly so.
Yep.
3 years, $51 million, so 17 a year, $34 million guaranteed.
So effectively 2 years fully guaranteed.
If you're the Chiefs, does that framework make sense for a Nick Bolton contract? Could you justify 17 a year for Nick Bolton? I kind of think yes. And I think you could also maybe say, okay, Bond set the market, but he's an all-pro and you've never been an all-pro. That maybe makes it more likely that there's something in between Patrick Queen money and Zach Bond money for the Chiefs and Bolton to reach an agreement on.
Yeah.
I tend to agree there. He's never been an all-pro, so like,
man, $17 million a year would be a lot because that's the fourth most for any linebacker. Tremaine Edmonds has a terrible contract. That Bears giving him $18 million was ridiculous. Fred Warner and Roquan Smith both get paid more. They deserve it. They're both awesome. Bond was great this year. Again, got that all-pro. He was played out of position, frankly, because coming out in the draft, didn't know if he was an edge guy, if he was an off-ball linebacker, if he was going to be a rush specialist, but from a linebacker alignment. And he ends up with Vic Fangio, who runs this bizarre defensive scheme where, like, everybody has a title, but everyone's job is unique from any other team, and it fit him absolutely perfectly. I don't think I would want to pay $17 million to Nick Bolton. That's rich for my blood. 2 years fully guaranteed. I mean, I can squint and see it, and I can envision the Chiefs front office saying, we'll do that for our guy. The continuity is worth part of that. He's the green dot. It's not like we ever have problems with alignment defensively or getting in the right spot. Execution, maybe, but the basic stuff, the getting lined up stuff, that's never a problem. Let's just, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just keep the guy we have. I can understand if they want to go in that direction. I wouldn't if I was calling the shots. Frankly, I Like, I would love Zach Bond on my team as opposed to Nick Bolton, but
I would rather have Bolton.
You have a longer track record.
Let me rephrase. If I were the Chiefs, I'd rather have Bolton because you know what he is.
You know what? Yeah,
and you know that he thrives in your defense, and you know your defenders around him trust him, and you know your defensive coordinator trusts him. But like, I think you can make a compelling case that Nick Bolton's been a steady presence in his career. He's been who he's been, and Zach Bond was awesome for 1 year.
Yeah, no, all those points are completely fair.
Yep.
Like, how do we know this isn't like a D Ford type of thing where it's the contract year being undefeated?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's certainly true. Although there are also instances where that has worked out in the Chiefs. Drew Tranquill, who was better in 23 than he was in 24, but he was still good this past season, and he got paid, and that worked out certainly for
Here's
the Chiefs.
the other thing, though, and we haven't talked about this vis-a-vis Bolton and his return, but Matt Verderam pointed this out on the podcast he does with Tucker Franklin, that football show on the KC Sports Network. The Chiefs have lived life without Nick Bolton. He missed a good chunk of the Super Bowl 58 year with that wrist injury.
Yes, he did.
And Drew Tranquill stepped in, wore the green dot, played really well, and the Chiefs defense didn't seem to miss a whole lot without Nick Bolton on the field for that stretch. Now, that was a really good Chiefs defense. That Chiefs defense was better than the one we saw in 2024, and I think probably projects better or would be better than the one I think we'll project to see in 2025. So there's that. You know, one player's performance is never just context-free. Like, it's always about the guys around you.
That's why stats are so hard in the NFL.
But if the Chiefs go back and look at that stretch of play and they decide, hey, look, we got Drew Tranquill on team-friendly terms for the next 2 years, and he can wear the green dot and anchor the middle of our defense, and we can use some of these cap savings to, maybe that's Justin Reid, maybe that's another veteran wide receiver, maybe that's more money to whoever your left tackle solution is. I'm not saying that's the direction they're going to go. In fact, I've been very adamant that that's not the direction they're going to go.
Sure.
But if that's the direction that they go, I think that will be why. And I don't think it will have anything to do with the financials. I think it will be, hey, yeah, we're actually okay with Drew Tranquill.
I also think too that I think Drew Tranquill was better that year than he was this past season.
I would agree.
Yeah, no, that's I would agree with that too. And I don't think he was bad in 24, but he was really, really good in 23.
Yeah. He was also playing for a contract because he didn't get a contract in LA.
Exactly.
And he got a prove it deal here, and it was like, hey, what can you do?
It's fine. If you say we're going to give you exactly what Zach Bond just got, fine. I'm not going to complain that much. Fine. I'll live with it. That is my official stance. I can live with it. It's not what I would consider the best use of money versus ability. But again, he's your guy. You know he fits. You know Spags loves him. It's fine.
I
can live with it.
I've saved the most obvious for last. The Chiefs have to go into 2025 with a proven commodity at left tackle now. Because if you have traded your all-pro left guard and you're going to replace him with a first-timer at the position in Kingsley Suamataia, and all roads are leading to that right now.
Yep.
You have got to go get a veteran with some chops who has played well in the NFL recently to play alongside Kingsley Suamataia. I think it's Ronnie Stanley or bust, because I think he was good last year, and for the first time, he was healthy and played all 17 games. He was better than Cam Robinson was. I would much rather have Ronnie Stanley and cross my fingers and hope that I get 14 to 17 games of Ronnie Stanley's quality than hope that Cam Robinson is not like in further decline, even if it costs me more money.
And people who scout offensive line, Brandon Thorne of Bleacher Report, who's the best at scouting offensive line, and some other people who do it around NFL media will tell you that Stanley's not the same player he was when he was in his athletic peak, because he is on the wrong side of 30 at this point. He's had all the injuries. Him at like 85-ish% of what he was a few years ago before the injuries really hampered him is still a good player. Like, it's not, he's fallen off. He's a who was the Cam who played for the Chiefs? Cam Irving.
Yeah, Cam Irving.
He's not Cam Irving at this point. He's just a little less than he was before. The Chiefs will take a little bit less. One thing that I think the Chiefs do need to account for long-term, though, because you mentioned it earlier on in the show, Dan, that, and I think a lot of people believe this, Juwan Taylor probably not going to play all 4 years on this contract. He's going into year 3. He's making $20 million per year annually. I don't think there's much, if anything, guaranteed in the 4th year of the contract. Even if it is Ronnie Stanley, you're not signing him to a 5-year deal at 31 years old with the injury history.
No, that's probably a 3-year.
You're making a change probably next offseason at right tackle, unless you're extending Taylor, which I don't see at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to draft a first. I think the Chiefs should go for a defensive lineman in the first round based on mock drafts I've seen, big boards I've seen, because I'm getting in the weeds of that stuff now. I think they're going to find a really valuable piece, a Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant, like a really good player at the end of the first round. I'd love for them to go defensive tackle. They might be forced to go first-round pick offensive tackle because you might need that 5th-year option. Like, you might just need this is a future guy. He might not be the best prospect, but we have to get tackle figured out long-term.
And
because
whoever,
right now, it feels like wide receiver did following 22 when it was like, well, what do we do here? And you drafted Rice, you drafted Worthy, you feel better there, even though I think they could add more depth. You got to do that with tackle now. Like, you have to figure out what it's going to look like in 27, 28, 29, not just 25, 26.
We'll take a timeout. We got Tim Fitzgerald coming up, bottom of this hour for the Wildcat Wrap-Up. Going to talk K-State hoops and football coming up in a bit. But first, it's What Is Wrong With You next on 580 WIBW. What is wrong with you on 580 Sports Talk is sponsored by our buddy Mo, State Farm agent Ryan Mo Winkle. Hey, why don't you give Ryan a call? 785-273-1572. Find out what Mo Winkle Insurance and Financial Services can do for you. Our current What is Wrong with You champion, the Double D drunk driver, the gentleman that got real liquored up and was FaceTiming his nude girlfriend when he got his car stuck on some train tracks. He made it off the tracks. His car did not. Possibly, again, because he was extremely drunk. And, again, distracted. Not only driving drunk, but driving distracted because his girlfriend was flashing him on FaceTime while he was driving. You know, those, I mean, boobs in 240p. What is this, 2002 on the internet? Come on, man.
FaceTime's like 740p now. What are you talking about?
I'm saying he's probably not on a real good network in LaPorte, Indiana, is what I'm saying.
That's true.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway. Let's do our stories.
Spencer's over here like, no, I bet those boobs look great.
I've been imagining how they looked all week, in fact.
Oh, my
That's
God.
mean. I shouldn't have said that. 2 news stories today. First one, we're going to Eastern UK. Little Steeping near Spilsby. Those are the names of the places in question here. St. Andrew's Church. Somebody broke in and stole some paintings, including a painting of the 10 Commandments. Does anybody know off the top of their head what the 7th commandment is?
Thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not steal.
Oof.
Apparently, this person did not take those words to heart. The items, all housed in heavy wooden frames, have an unknown exact value, but hold sentimental value to the church and its members. They were discovered missing back on February 23rd. The church did not show signs of forced entry, and police are urging anyone who may have seen these paintings for sale to come forward. They are keen to find the person responsible, police added.
This is a very British story.
Such a British story. Stole a painting of the Lord's Prayer, a painting of Moses with the 10 Commandments, and a painting depicting the 10 Commandments, which again include "Thou shalt not steal." Did not give them pause for even 1 second as they walked off with those paintings.
I believe I have heard that the most purchased book in world history is the Bible, and also the most stolen book in world history is the Bible.
I think that's right.
Yeah, that's. I feel like you might be missing the point a little bit.
I wonder what the second most stolen book is.
That's a good question.
Spencer, you have a story today.
Yes, we're going to go back to our favorite state, Florida. A Florida man is accused of unintentionally setting himself up to be arrested after deputies say he sent a text message about leaving illegal drugs behind in a home he was asked to leave. According to the Holmes County Sheriff's Office, deputies responded to a call for service on Friday about having Christopher Newton, removed and trespassed from a home. While on scene, deputies said Newton texted the homeowner a message that stated he had, quote, left a baggie on the nightstand, end quote. Deputies said they got consent to search the room where Newton had been staying and found a plastic bag containing a substance that tested positive for cocaine. Newton was arrested, charged with possession of cocaine. In a social media post, Holmes County Sheriff's Office stated, if you're going to leave something behind, maybe don't text about it.
Well, there could have been anything in that baggie.
That's true.
They got probable cause and consent based on a baggie. I bring my sandwich to lunch in a baggie sometimes.
Well, no, it was the person just gave him consent because they wanted the guy to leave.
Well, some friend. Well, maybe they're not a friend.
Yeah.
So he was just chilling out in the house, and they say, nah, man, you got to leave. And he was such a bad roommate that, okay, this really reframes the story now that I'm thinking about it this way. He was such bad company that his buddy was like, yeah, he said he's talking about a baggie. I bet there's drugs in it. This guy sucks.
Take him away.
It's right there. That baggie right there. The one with the drugs in it. All right, who wins today?
I gotta go with the people stealing from the church.
Yeah.
Stealing from a church is wild.
Yeah, man. I don't think you paid attention to the lessons in Sunday school, my friend.
As someone points out, a text from the 615 on our text line. If someone steals the Bible, they probably need it.
Good point.
They probably should open it. That wins today, but does it beat the guy FaceTiming his naked girlfriend while driving drunk?
No.
It's going to be a really tough
Technically,
one
we don't
to
even
beat.
know if she was naked, just that she was flashing him.
Yeah. Well, that part of her was naked.
Yeah, that's true.
That's our winner on What Is Wrong With You, sponsored by Ryan Mowinkle. Mowinkle Insurance and Financial Services. Go to his website, ryanmowinkle.com. Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com joins us next for the Wildcat Wrap-Up. We are joined in the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits hotline here on 580 Sports Talk by Tim Fitzgerald, publisher at GoPowerCat.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Become a VIP subscriber. Get all of the inside Cats info from Fitz and the staff at GoPowerCat.com. He joins us every Wednesday for the Wildcat Wrap-Up. Fitz, K-State is in the Queen City, one of many, many American and worldwide cities who lay claim to the nickname the Queen City. Cincinnati, Ohio, tonight. Before we get there, what city in Kansas should lay claim to being the Queen City? Because no city in Kansas has staked a claim to that nickname. What city in Kansas should be the Queen City?
Dude, I can't come up with anything funny. I don't know. Maybe my hometown is Salina, and we can put up a Freddie Mercury statue on Santa Fe. That sounds good.
Yeah, I suggested Salina. I felt like that's on a plate for Salina to say, you know what? We will be the Queen City. Feels like something they would want to do. Put their name on it.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. My hometown's a wonderful place, but what is Salina's identity?
There's a Brahms by the airport.
Is there really?
I mean, it's like fairly close. I don't know that it's like next door, but it's like kind of on the way.
Across the interstate.
Yeah, it's like in the area.
Okay.
Okay, look, it has a Brahms and an airport, all right? They're at least in the same town.
Yeah, I think that's actually on one of the signs, the Welcome to Salina signs outside of town. Tim Fitzgerald joining us for the Wildcat Wrap-Up. Fitz, K-State won against Colorado on the weekend. Colorado's not very good, but K-State really needed a win. What can K-State take away from having won a game without Coleman Hawkins and hopefully take forward to these final 2 regular season games where they may have Coleman back starting perhaps tonight?
Let me be critical of you for a second. By saying Colorado isn't very good is a vast understatement of their level of suckage.
Yeah, it's been a rough year. Rough year for Tad Boyle.
Yep, but as you mentioned, I think the team needed that little boost of confidence. Is going to help them enough tonight at Cincinnati? I don't think so, but I think they found some things that worked for them in that game, and then they let up off the gas. They were up by almost 20 in the second half and ended up winning by 9, and there was a point there with about a minute left that a 3-pointer rimmed out for Colorado to get it to 6, and I sit there and was wondering what happens if that goes in, because K-State is fading fast. So they got a lot of stuff they need to pay attention to. And, of course, it wasn't just Coleman Hawkins. They played that game without Moby Ike Garuka also, and he's a valuable part of this team, particularly with Coleman out. I don't know what his status is for tonight, but we'll find out in about an hour and a half, I guess. This is a pretty critical game. If K-State wants to find its way into any form of postseason play, they're going to have to find a couple of wins here. They got to get to 500, I think, at least, to be invited to something, and they got some work to do. They're 1 under right now.
Earlier today, the K-State basketball program received a commitment from Ashton McGee, I believe is the young man's name. He is committed to Kansas State and committed to play for Jerome Tang. He is a prospect out of Mississippi. I've watched some highlight footage. It looks like he could grab a quarter off the top of the backboard. Looks like he has fantastic leaping ability. Is this the start, though, broadly, of maybe a bit of a recommitment to recruiting the high school ranks for K-State in a way that maybe makes a little more sense for K-State? They took some high-profile swings at guys like A.J. Dibansa and Darren Peterson, and those didn't work out. But a developmental prospect like McGee, is this a little bit more what it's going to look like for K-State recruiting high school moving forward and a recommitment to doing it starting with next year's class?
Yeah, it's been a complete 180 over the course of this year. At the start of the year, they were swinging for the fences on high school kids, and that was it. And now they backed up and realized we have to have a better framework of a roster from year to year, a core group of guys who are invested in the program and continue to develop and get better. And I think David Gasson has convinced them that that's the path forward, because he's the best player on the team. And guys, he came to K-State averaging like 3.5 points and 2.5 boards a game after 2 seasons at Virginia Tech. So I think they want to get back in the developmental business. And watching McGee, you mentioned his athleticism. Everyone always wants a comp. Who can you compare this kid to? I think they went out and found a Wesley Iwundu clone. 6'7", incredibly long-limbed, very athletic, but is going to need some development. Because if you recall, when Iwundu came in, Marcus Foster was clearly the better player. And by the end of their college careers, Iwundu was the better player, and he's the one who ended up with some time in the NBA. And I think that's exactly the kind of player McGee reminds me of.
Tim Fitzgerald is our guest, joining us for the Wildcat Wrap-Up here on 580 Sports Talk. Make sure you check out all of his great work and his staff's great work at GoPowerCat.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Fitz joins us here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. Similar question, Fitz, but regarding the transfer portal going into next year, because every team in the country uses it to some degree to fill holes or to rebuild a roster, etc. What do you think going forward is going to be the refined or retooled strategy when it comes to what kind of guys K-State is looking for in the portal?
Well, they're going to try to hit a home run. I mean, everyone wants to go to the portal and find that guy, and I think we agree they probably need that. Coleman Hawkins won't be back, whether he plays the rest of this year or not. He's done, and they kind of need that alpha. Although Coleman Hawkins is the fourth leading scorer on this team, which is kind of astonishing. And I think they'll still do that, but also I think we saw them pivot a little bit last year to taking some underclassmen. They were kind of, it looked like they were just interested in grabbing some seniors that could come in and play, but I think we're going to see a more emphasis on multi-year players through the portal. That is someone extremely special or fits a specific need that is a one and done. I think they'll go that route, but I think they are going to start looking for guys that can be around for multiple years, because Gasson in year 3 was really good. Cam Carter, got better, and now that he's in year 3, even though he's at LSU, he's improved vastly. And I just think they see the framework of a better system than what they were trying to lay out at the start of the year.
Of the guys who transferred in this year, and there were a lot of them, as we know, the ones who still have eligibility. So, take Coleman Hawkins, excuse me. Coleman Francis made horrible movies in the 1960s. Coleman Hawkins, take him out of the equation among other guys. I don't know why I confused them right there. How many of those guys do you think K-State wants to bring back next year? There's a lot that has to be discussed in exit interviews and all of that. But do you think that this staff would like to bring back most, if not all, of the guys they brought in this year?
Yeah. In fact, I'll one up it. They really want to get Max Jones back because he played his first season at D2, and there's been a court ruling that doesn't count that. NCAA has pushed back on that, but K-State's working on that. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be a big core group of guys. Ghana Nyenso is the one I'm really a little bit interested in, because there was talk that he was gone, and now he's getting to see some more playing time, and we're seeing some development there. If he'd be around, we don't really know what's going on with Bay Fall with the injury and where his head space is at. Buddy Rich has now seen some time, but I think we'd all be surprised if he's back. So yeah, I mean, if they can retain most of those guys and sign a couple high school kids, they're really not going to need a whole lot from the portal. They're just going to need, maybe the lead guy, the star of the show, and some other pieces that can complement that. So we'll see as those names pop up. But I think we'll see another commitment tomorrow in basketball, and then it'll kind of shut down to the portal time.
We can do a little bit more of an in-depth dive on David Castillo once the season officially comes to a close following the Big 12 tournament, maybe NCAA tournament. Who knows? Maybe the Cats shock the world. But how at this juncture would you grade the season for David Castillo? There have been some very impressive ups. There have been some understandable downs for a slight project of a freshman. How would you grade what Castillo has been able to do for the Cats?
I think I'd probably say a C. I mean, I honestly expected a little more, but I also think he wasn't given a chance early in the season to kind of develop it the way he needed to. And now he's seeing added time against really good opponents. And he's learning the hard way, and he is learning. He's getting better, and he's understanding how to get his shot, how to defend. Just how to operate at this level is completely different than anything these kids have ever seen before, even if they played at a high level in AAU. And he's getting there. I think he'll be a pretty significant contributor next year. Starter? No, probably not. But I think Castillo will be a really nice piece of this puzzle for this team next year.
We're joined by Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com here on the Fleming Place Wine and Spirits Hotline. And last week, Fitz, we talked about K-State women's hoops, and it's going to be about matchups when they get to the Big 12 tournament. They're going to have to take on UCF tomorrow, but then if they win, they're aligned to take on West Virginia and potentially TCU. How do you like their matchups against those two teams if they continue to move, or if they move on? And obviously, they had a tough loss to West Virginia a couple weeks back.
Yep, that was in Morgantown. Typical of West Virginia teams, going back to the Bob Huggins era, when West Virginia plays basketball very aggressively, defensively, they're always better at home where they get more calls because of the crowd. And they just kind of let West Virginia get under their skin. I think they'd like another shot at that. They certainly have some things to correct, but try to get through that UCF team first is essential. And this team's really struggling. They seem to have, whatever they did to look good when Aoka Lee first went out, I think teams have adjusted and they haven't shown a proper answer yet, and we'll see if they can come up with that in Kansas City.
A couple more questions for Tim Fitzgerald to go powercat.com as he joins us here for the Wildcat Wrap-Up on 580 Sports Talk. Fitz, K-State baseball's put together a nice-looking start to their season with a couple of marquee wins, 3 wins over top 25 opponents, and they lost a lot of big-time talent off of last year's super regional team, but PU seems to have replaced a lot of that talent with some impressive transfer additions and some freshmen who looked the part as well early on.
Yeah, I think K-State's exposure there at the end of the year really helped them in the portal and maybe recruiting. I think kids could see it was a fun brand of baseball and go in there and contribute. They can play at a high level in a really good conference, and I think they leveraged that really well in adding players. And I'm looking forward to getting more familiar with the team as maybe when they finally can come home and play, which was supposed to be this week, I believe, and that didn't work out because of weather. Shocking. But I think this is going to be a really fun baseball team to watch. And I think Pete Hughes is settling into what he wants his program to look like at Kansas State and how he can operate at the highest level for Kansas State baseball. And I think he's caught on to some stuff here, and this team's playing with a lot of confidence after a little bit of a sluggish start.
Supposed to be at home against William and Mary starting on Friday for a 3-game weekend tilt. Hopefully no more freak blizzards on the docket, right?
Well, I hope William and Mary both bring their jackets.
Yeah, it's a little unfair, right? The K-State's entire team is playing against 2 people.
I know. It's everyone's out to get K-State, including William and Mary.
On the bright side, though, they've never had a Title IX issue. Total equality across the board. You get one girl and one boy on every team, William and Mary. Terrible joke to round out the Wildcat Wrap-Up with Tim Fitzgerald, but I know we wouldn't have it any other way. Fitz and the gang at GoPowerCat.com. Cover K-State like nobody else. Be a VIP subscriber to 24/7 Sports today. Fitz, always a pleasure. We'll do it again next Wednesday.
We're a little more than an hour from tip-off in the Queen City, which I thought was Charlotte, so I'm very confused.
No, we decided that the better nickname for Cincinnati was Porkopolis, so we're going with that.
Hey, it's at Fifth Third Bank this game.
Yeah, Fifth Third Arena, another credit union arena for this one. Thanks, Fitz. That is Tim Fitzgerald. We'll take a break, come back, we will wrap up this edition of 580 Sports Talk. Wrapping up and walking off this edition of 580 Sports Talk so we can make way for K-State hoops. It's final word time. Spencer Dupuis, start us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys mentioned this today on the show, but it's been mentioned, I think, in the last couple of weeks. The floor that is down at T-Mobile Center in Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament is just atrocious on TV. They put out the shots on social media, the stills, didn't look too bad, but it gets so distracting when you watch little highlight videos come across on X. I was very distracted.
Brett Yormark should be hauled in front of a tribunal for his crimes against basketball. There's no question. That's one of the worst things that the Big 12 has done in the name of trying to make itself stand out.
Final word for me today. One, I agree with you entirely, Spencer. We did a whole segment about it last week. It is absolutely disgusting. I think the Joe Thuney trade, once you take the emotion out of it, which I understand is hard, you can understand it. The idea that you want to get off of a guy a year too early rather than a year too late, it makes sense. The Chiefs decided they'd rather go a little bit younger, go probably a little bit more athletic in Trey Smith. Understandable. They still have some moves to work on, specifically at left tackle, to determine whether or not this was a great move, but I can understand it. My only qualm at the moment, you got to get better than a future fourth. Even this year, a fourth would have been a better return.
My final word is that I am excited to see what Kingsley Suamataia can do at left guard for the Chiefs. I think his physicality and I think his mentality as a player will make him successful on the interior line. His rawness, lack of polish, I think will be less of a problem. I think they'll be able to get really good football out of Kingsley at left guard. And I think the Chiefs have a starter there that is going to do well and revitalize his Chiefs career. That's going to do it for us. K-State Hoops tips off at 6. Pregame coming up as we're done here. We're back with you tomorrow from 3 until 6. For Brendan and Spencer, I'm Dan. This was 580 Sports Talk. Good night.